Definitely. Definitely a one-of-a-kind event. Today we have two speakers. One is Jim Mundy, who is historian emeritus of the Philadelphia Union League, and he will talk about one of the artifacts in the Camp William Penn Museum. James Paradis will follow, and he's going to talk about the Reverend Jeremiah Asher, a local minister, and we'll learn of his commitment to the 6th Regiment. We'll take questions after the talks, either from the chat box or verbally as we are able. So with that, I am going to let Jim Mundy take over, and he will be talking about a painting, the original of which hangs in the Union League. We have a print of it, and it's called The Three Medals of Honor. Jim?
Thank you very much, Joyce. Good to see some familiar faces and some I don't know. So welcome to Kroll's Black History Month program today. I hope you can see, so over my right shoulder is the actual print from the museum itself, which is at 1618 Willow Avenue in Elkins Park. And it's a signed reproduction by the artist Don Troiani, who is considered the foremost living American military artist today, or certainly of our generation itself. He was from New York City originally, but he trained at the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts here in Philadelphia and at the New York Students League. And his career was off and running practically right away. His original specialty was Civil War paintings, very representational. That is, they're very historical and they represent the actual scenes themselves. And Don is infamous for reproducing or making paintings that reproduce the actual environment and conditions under which his paintings took place. So when you look at the painting over my shoulder, and you'll see another copy of it when Jim does his talk, you'll notice that it's a hazy morning. It's about 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning of September the 29th of 1864, and the sun wasn't out yet. You can see it just peeking through. So that's the level of detail that Don Troiani goes to in his paintings that make them better than anybody else's. So the painting itself was unveiled on June the 24th of 2013 at the Union League of Philadelphia, and it was commissioned by the League, the Abraham Lincoln Foundation of the League, as it was then, in 2012, and then unveiled on June the 24th of 2013. And through the generosity of a League member named Bob Andrews, the painting was done. And the reason the League did it is because the League had no representation in the clubhouse itself of any of its contributions to the establishment of the United States Colored Troop Regiments in Philadelphia or the establishment of Camp William Penn itself. And yet the League was incredibly and intrinsically involved in all of that. So once the Bureau of Colored Troops was established in May of 1863, by June the 17th, Philadelphians had received permission from Secretary of War Stanton to raise 3 regiments. Colored regiments as they were known. And on the 18th of June, the Supervisory Committee for the Enlistment of Colored Troops was established. And the first thing they did on June the 26th was create Camp William Penn. Camp William Penn would then become the first and largest of all the training camps for Black troops in the country during the Civil War and trained more troops than all the other training camps combined in the country itself. So eventually approximately 11,000 soldiers went through Camp William Penn. So all right. The 6th was organized or mustered in on July the 24th of 1863. They had 2 months of training. They mustered out in September of 1863 and were shipped into the Virginia Theater of War, where they engaged in a number of battles and operations, both in Virginia and in North Carolina. But it wasn't until May the 4th of 1864 that they were moved, if you will, or reassigned to the Army of the James, commanded by General Benjamin Butler. And Butler's task, as part of the larger Richmond-Fredericksburg campaign, was to keep the Confederate troops occupying the area around New Market Heights and Chaffin's Farm, which would be about 12 miles southeast of Richmond, keep them occupied while the rest of the Army did an about a bit of a left flank, if you will, and tried to disrupt the rail lines that were going into Richmond itself and to Petersburg as well. And so eventually on the morning of September the 28th of 1864, the Battle of Newmarket's Heights, also known as the Battle of Chafin Farm, began, as I said earlier, about 5:30 in the morning. The 6th USCT Regiment was part of a brigade that was part of the 10th Army Corps, which consisted of Butler's right flank, commanded by General David Birney. They were incredibly, well, they went against the Texas Brigade. At that point, probably the Confederacy's best brigade of soldiers on the battlefield itself. And they occupied something called the Newmarket Road, which ran south of Newmarket Heights, east to west. And it was that line that this brigade attacked, including the 6th USCT Regiment. The Texans withheld their fire until the soldiers were approximately 150 yards away, and then unleashed a volley that just decimated the ranks of this regiment. Within 20 minutes, over 50% of the regiment was either dead or wounded on the ground, including the color guard. And the worst thing that could happen to a regiment during the Civil War is if a regiment lost its colors to the enemy. It was just the most ignominious thing that could happen to them. And so the first thing that other soldiers did was to make sure that they could save the colors. And in this instance, 3 officers in the 6th USCT Regiment, um, Staff Sergeant Thomas Hawkins, First Sergeant Alexander Kelly, and then Lieutenant Nathan Edgerton, the adjutant of the 6th USCT Regiment, saved the flags from being captured and continued the charge against the abatis behind which the Texas Brigade was firing. And the battle was immediately was a success. So they succeeded in preserving the colors of the regiment and driving back the rebel forces for at least the immediate time that the battle was taking place. As a result of that heroic effort, those 3 soldiers were awarded the Medal of Honor, hence the name of the painting, the 3 Medals of Honor. What's interesting is that they got them over 3 very different lengths of time. Alexander Kelly received his on March the 30th. I'm sorry, yes, I was right, March the 30th, April the 6th of 1865. Thomas Hawkins received his on February the 8th of 1870. And Nathan Edgerton received his on March the 30th of 1898. You can see the spread of time between those 3 officers receiving their medals of honor. So I hope that all of you get a chance to visit the museum and make sure you look up this print. It is an incredible depiction of a heroic moment in Civil War history that specifically shows the skill and the bravery of these Black soldiers during the war itself. And even better yet, if you get the chance, go to the Union League of Philadelphia and see the actual painting itself. So thank you all for that. Joyce, back to you.
Fine, thank you very much. Dr. James Paradis is going to talk about Jeremiah Asher, who was a local minister and felt the call to be a chaplain, and he was the chaplain in the 6th Regiment. And Dr. Paradis is in the process of writing a book about Jeremiah Asher. So we're going to get the first glimpse today. So here's Jim Paradis.
Thank you. I hope you'll ask questions at the end because there's so much I had to leave out of the life of this incredible man. And I hope maybe you can ask questions about something that I had to cut to make this a reasonable length. Well, I'm going to start out by talking about the same way that Jeremiah Asher did himself. He wrote his autobiography and he began not talking about himself, but his grandfather. So that is how we will start out. Whoops, not that. Let's get out. I'm going to share my screen here. Come on now. Okay. Can you see the screen? Let's see this. Slideshow. Oh, Joyce or Jim, can we see the slides?
Oh, no, we cannot.
Uh,
We see you.
okay. Okay. All right. Still not. No, you still can't see it.
No.
Okay. Let me try this again. All right. Oh, I gotta select the screen. Okay. Oh, wow. Oh, here we go. Here we go. No, no, not that. Oh. No, that's not it. No, okay. Let's try again here. Okay. Hasn't worked yet, right? Let's get that. Let's try one more time. Okay. Now I'm sharing screen. From beginning. All right. How about now?
No. No, no.
You're sharing your screen, but you're not. Well, now you're not. But you were sharing your screen, but it was just what you were seeing, but not what you're trying to transmit.
All right. Let's try this
So
again.
you're getting close.
Okay. Thanks. All right. Now, let's go to this. All right. Now let's try share screen. All right. All right. Can we see it yet?
No.
Not yet. I think, Jim, when you share screen, then you
There you
have to
go.
direct it to which screen you want.
Okay.
That you may have multiple screens open on your laptop, on your computer.
Oh, I see. I see. Okay. 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 Now let's try this. Okay, we got it yet?
No.
All right, what I'm going to do, I'll just have to have a reduced version of this. I'll just have to show you. Okay, where are we? Slideshow. Yeah.
I want everybody to know it worked this morning.
It did. We tried this. All right. Well, can you see anything of this?
Nope.
No, Jim.
All right. Well, I'm just going to have to do this without the slides, I guess. Darn, this is a shame. Yes, this did work this morning. All right. All right. Well, we'll just get rid of this then. Oh, there we are. We might have it now.
Yes, you
Yeah,
have.
from the beginning.
Hallelujah. All right. Sorry for the delay here, folks. All right. So I'm going to start it like Jeremiah did, talking about his grandfather. When his grandfather was about 4 years of age in Africa, he and his older brother were tending the family grain field when the older brother spotted slave catchers coming in their directions. He told his little brother to run, but his little legs were just too slow. So the older lad scooped up his brother and tried to run with him on his back, but the load slowed him down. They'd both be surely caught unless he did the only thing he could do. He put his brother down and escaped. The younger African was captured, bound, and gagged. A slave ship took him to colonial Connecticut. In Connecticut, he was purchased and named Gad Asher. He married and had children. When the revolution came, his legal master was drafted to fight. He promised Gad his freedom if he would serve in his place. So Gad seized this opportunity. For the next several years, he was exposed to the elements, extreme heat and cold, suffered severe illness. He lost his vision and his health declined to where he was unfit for service. So as war came near the end, he was granted a furlough by the authority of George Washington. After the war, when he came home, he did not get the freedom that he was promised. His legal owner required him to pay back the price that he had paid for him. Eventually, he was able to buy his freedom, helped by his military pension. In his old age, Gad Asher bequeathed property to his grandson, Jeremiah, but he passed on much more than that. He helped him to build his self-esteem and his thirst for justice. Gad and two other soldiers of color from the Revolution who lived in the neighborhood often talked over the motives that drove them all to bear what they did endure through the war. As Jeremiah wrote years later, they were the only men I knew that fought in the terrible and never to be forgotten battle for American liberty. I was so accustomed to hear these men talk until I almost fancied myself that I had more rights than any white man in the town. Such were the lessons taught me by the old black soldiers of the American Revolution. Thus, my first ideas of the right of the colored man to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness were received from these old veterans and champions for liberty. For whenever I was insulted, I would always resist it. Neither my father nor mother could persuade me that white boys were allowed to insult me just because I was colored. I invariably felt justified in defending myself. Gad's only male child, Ruel, fathered Jeremiah. Ruel lived a more ordinary life than either his father Gad or his son Jeremiah. He married Jerusha, a Native American who fathered and mothered Jeremiah. Ruel had no time for religion, but Gad joined the Independent Church of Hartford, and Jeremiah helped his nearly blind grandfather get to church. Jeremiah never heard of Baptists until a visiting Baptist preacher came to town and performed immersive baptisms. He felt drawn to the Baptists. One of the problems he had with the Baptist church that he wound up joining was that they had segregated facilities. He stopped attending, and when he was asked why, he came back and talked to the elders at their meeting, and he gave an eloquent defense of why he was he was refusing to participate. He said, "I would." There was no recording of what he said, or transcript, but it was to me a solemn step to take. But there seemed to be a principle involved which I had no right to surrender. I will lift up my voice against it. I believed the scheme originated in the prejudice of one portion of the church against the other, and I should sin against God if I were to give it my sanction. He believed, as he said, I thought, to bear my testimony against such wrong towards my race, such distinction in the house of God was contrary to the spirit of Christianity. I knew an evil which Scripture rebuked, I might myself protest against. Eloquence of Asher in that meeting caused the church leaders, without discussion, to immediately end all segregation in that church. But Jeremiah shared the desire of a number of Black church members to establish their own separate church for worship. And a recently licensed preacher from another Baptist church agreed to serve as pastor, and they set up a new church. They met in a schoolhouse. Soon after establishing this church, this pastor left them for a more established church. Jeremiah took on the responsibility of finding another replacement, which he did. But again and again, pastors came, stayed for a while, and then left. Each time, Asher had to secure a new preacher. Now, Asher himself felt unqualified to preach in God's name. He judged his own academic preparation to be inadequate for a spiritual leader, and he feared embarrassing himself by revealing his lack of knowledge. But he recalled that one night, everything changed. He said, awakening suddenly from my feverish sleep, I imagined that I heard a voice speaking in tones as loud as thunder, preach yourself. I immediately rose and fell on my knees before the Lord. A perfect resignation possessed me, and I promised the Lord that night that I would go just as I was and work in his vineyard in any portion or capacity he might see fit to appoint. He received a license to preach from his former church, the First Baptist, but he still felt unprepared for this ministry. He felt the need to educationally improve himself. He decided to travel to Providence, Rhode Island, and study at the seminary at Brown University. Arriving in Providence, he applied for admission to the seminary. As he studied and awaited a notice of acceptance, just like in Connecticut, Black members of the First Baptist Church in Providence began acting on their plan to form a new congregation, which Asher described as a distinct body where they could worship with greater liberty and enjoy equal religious privileges. They asked Asher to serve as their pastor. Now he was torn in two different directions. Asher felt this dilemma because either one of these two paths he could see as following his divine calling. He decided to start the new church. A council of 6 churches unanimously approved the formation of a new religious community and approved Jeremiah Asher as minister of the gospel and as pastor for this flock. He ministered in Providence for 9 years. And as much as he learned and he enjoyed it there, he believed that both he and his congregation needed a change. And that the time had come when he should resign as pastor of the Meeting Street Baptist Church of Providence. As a result of his extensive travels on behalf of the church's regional convention, church members in many places knew the name of Jeremiah Asher. Within a month of his resignation, other congregations, including churches in Rochester and the District of Columbia, invited him to speak. He accepted the call to visit Washington, where a new church was starting to form. When his conveyance reached Philadelphia, Reverend Asher chose to make an extended stopover. He accepted an invitation to preach from Shiloh Baptist Church. Although this church was in need of a pastor at the time, they extended him the invitation without any idea of this being preaching on trial. He made a positive impression, though, and as soon as he left for the nation's capital, letters constantly came to him asking him to return. Once again, Jeremiah Asher arrived at the scene of the birth of a new fellowship of believers who were just breaking away from their old church. As he helped the church get established, he continued to receive letters from Philadelphia. He finally accepted the call. The congregation at Shiloh Baptist Church chose him as their pastor May 17th, 1849. A major reason that Asher chose Shiloh was the church building itself, which he described as commodious yet plain. Acquiring this building had driven the church deeply into debt. The Shiloh congregation faced the specter of losing their spiritual home to creditors. Reverend Asher believed that saving the church would be one of the most noble acts that he could perform in his lifetime. Efforts to raise funds to pay off the church debt had failed, and the congregation faced the peril of losing their home. Shiloh's governors discussed with him the necessity of Reverend Asher traveling abroad to appeal for financial aid. Asher agreed. He first went back to Providence, where Abigail and their two children still resided. His wife, who had developed disabilities in her limbs, did not want him to go. But he believed that this trip was God's will. And as hard as it was, he left his family in Providence, trusting their friends in that city would look after their well-being. Shiloh could only raise enough money to pay for their pastor's one-way passage to England, with virtually no money for expenses. So, left on his own to acquire funds to pay living expenses while in Britain and to pay for return passage, Asher sailed away to Europe with $20 in his pocket. He would not return to the U.S. for over 14 months. Asher arrived at Liverpool when Britain was in the midst of a cholera epidemic. He had to bypass some towns in the throes of the epidemic and come back to them later when it had passed. For over a year, Reverend Asher would travel from town to town, often on foot, sometimes walking miles between towns, sometimes in the pouring rain, arriving cold, wet, hungry, looking for a place to stay, and relying on the kindness of strangers. While in England, Asher wrote an autobiography. In 1850, in London, he published an 80-page book entitled Incidents in the Life of the Reverend J. Asher. After raising enough funds to save Shiloh Church, he sailed home. He traveled first to Providence to visit his wife and family for 2 or 3 days, then traveled with his family to settle into his new pastorate. In Philadelphia, the famed African-American singer, Elizabeth Greenfield, who performed for the Queen of England and was known as the Black Swan, came to live at the Asher's home on Rodman Street. Greenfield gave music lessons in the parlor and helped train a renowned Shiloh church choir. By the way, there's a historical marker there marking where Greenfield lived. It does not mention Asher. Uh, Asher spoke out publicly against slavery as an evil institution. He served as a delegate to the 1855 Anti-Slavery Convention in Philadelphia. Fellow Pennsylvanians in attendance include Stephen Smith, Jacob C. White, and Robert Purvis. Philadelphia's Banneker Institute, a jewel for cultivating the intellect of the city's Black population, established a series of lectures and debates. In February 1856, Jeremiah Asher addressed the group as part of the series. Scheduled as a debate, the pastor argued the negative to the proposition, does the Bible sanction slavery? No. Minutes of the organization indicate frequently poor attendance of their programs, but when Reverend Asher spoke, he drew a substantial crowd. The secretary of the Institute, Jacob White, recorded in the minutes, house crowded to overflowing. In 1857, Robert Purvis co-founded the Vigilant Association of Philadelphia. Members of the organization dedicated themselves to protecting Philadelphia's African-American community from being kidnapped into slavery and to giving legal aid to any who might be accused of fleeing slavery. Some evidence suggests Asher's membership in this organization, but because helping slaves escape violated federal laws, few activists even would leave a written record of their committing a felony. Speaking of committing a felony, the abolitionist John Brown visited Philadelphia in 1858, seeking support from Black Philadelphians for his planned raid into the slave states. While in the city, Brown was a guest in the home of Stephen Smith and of David Bustill Bowser, the artist. Brown also made trips to Philadelphia the next year, one visit just 3 days before his raid. It is unclear whether Asher ever met Brown, but he was very familiar with the people with whom the abolitionists stayed. October 16th, Brown led 21 men, including 5 African Americans, into Harper's Ferry. They captured the armory and arsenal there, but soon had to fight against local militia and eventually against Marines sent from Washington. 5 of the raiders escaped, including 1 African American. The rest were killed or captured. Brown was wounded and captured. Oops, wait a minute. Through his trial, Brown was able to communicate his cause through letters to the newspapers and interviews with reporters. He turned his trial around and put slavery on trial, not him. He became a hero to Northern opponents of slavery. Brown was found guilty and was scheduled for execution in December. On the day of his execution, John Brown sympathizers met at Philadelphia's National Hall on Market Street to hold a vigil. The meeting drew an immense crowd of 4,000, both supporters and haters of Brown. Inside the hall, a large number of anti-abolitionists tried to shout down the speakers, such as Robert Purvis. Only a huge police presence prevented a riotous mob attack. A call was made for a church to host a prayer vigil for John Brown. Earlier, Bethel AME Church had considered holding such a vigil, but fears of retaliation against AME members in southern states canceled any such plans. Jeremiah Asher announced announced that his church, Shiloh Church, would hold a vigil. Later that day at Shiloh Baptist Church, the Reverend Asher criticized the officers of the AME Church for canceling. Asher said, "We have 6,000 brethren of the same faith in Richmond and 4,000 in Petersburg. And if I knew that the authorities there would shut up every church in those places because we opened ours to pray for John Brown, I would still go on and pray." And shouts of approval erupted from the audience. He went on to share his view that God was working out means for the abolition of slavery in his own way. Now, Asher must have drawn a breath at this time because he knew that the next thing he was about to say was going to get a strong reaction. He emphatically declared, "If the cause of human freedom is to be served by Brown's death, then I want him to die." And gasps and groans came out after that. Following Asher, the Reverend Jabez Campbell said that if praying to God was treason, then he was engaged in treason. Part of his family, he said, were now in slavery, and shouts of "so is mine" burst out from all parts of the room. He asked the audience, "Is it treason to pray for them?" And a resounding no followed. He concluded to an enthusiastic response, "If it be treason to pray for the abolition of slavery, then I am engaged in treason, and all the powers of earth and hell should not prevent me from praying for John Brown and his heroic comrades." Later that evening, the church was crowded with Black Philadelphians. Having learned that John Brown's body would be arriving in Philadelphia by train for embalming, a committee of 50 formed to receive the body on its arrival in the depot. Very likely, Jeremiah Asher would have been part of that reception group. Mayor Henry, however, feared that a riot might erupt from the rumored pro-Southern horde that would mob the station. He convinced Brown's widow to support his plan to foil this plot. When the train arrived in the city, a decoy coffin strewn with flowers and flags was carefully lifted from the train, distracting potential protesters. And the train continued on unmolested, carrying Brown's body safely through the city. John Brown's raid had quickly failed, but in the end, it succeeded beyond expectations. The war that would end Southern slavery began with Southerners firing on Fort Sumter just 16 months after John Brown's death. After Fort Sumter, thousands of Northerners rallied to the support of the nation's war effort and to avenge the assault on their flag. For African Americans, however, even at the war's outset, this conflict had deeper meaning. They realized early in the war that it would become a fight against slavery. In many states, Black volunteers stepped forward, but they were told that this was a white man's war and it was a war to preserve the Union, not a war against slavery. Eventually, however, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation, which declared slaves in the areas that were in rebellion to be free, and for the first time, officially authorized the enlistment of Black soldiers. Jeremiah Asher joined a number of prominent Philadelphians, including Octavius V. Cato, in actively recruiting volunteers for Philadelphia's African American regiments. The Union League gave substantial financial aid to the effort, and huge posters, 8-foot-tall broadsides, appeared around Philadelphia. At the bottom of the broadsides, by the way, we have an original one in the museum, which you can see when we open up again in May. And if you look at the bottom of the broadside, you can see the list of the major sponsors of the effort, and one of the names in there, of course, is the Reverend J. Asher. The organization through which women most participated in the Civil War was the U.S. Sanitary Commission, which helped make sure that needed medical supplies and other things necessary for healthy camps and hospitals were supplied to the men in the field. To assist Black volunteers, the Colored Women's Sanitary Commission was formed. The local officers were Mrs. Caroline Johnson, president, Mrs. Irina Ruffin, vice president, and Reverend Jeremiah Asher, the secretary. About this time, Asher wrote an expanded autobiographical work. As you can see, it's called An Autobiography with Details of Visit to England. In this, he went on. This was published in 1862, but for some reason, Asher does not mention John Brown, does not mention the war, does not mention conflict between North and South. It's really a personal autobiography, not a life and times. Encouraging young Black men to enlist. Oh, by the way, this print appears in that second autobiography. It's the only other image that we have of Jeremiah Asher. So now, besides him encouraging Blacks to enlist, he's starting to consider.
We haven't seen your slideshow. We're still on the title page.
No.
I'm sorry to interrupt,
Oh,
but I think you would want to know.
Thank you. I'm glad you told me. I wonder how I can do this. Oh boy.
But you've been very descriptive, so I think you should just keep going.
Okay, we will do that. Oh boy. All right. All right, where are we here? Okay. So Asher considered the possibility of enlisting himself, in spite of his advanced age of 51 years. At that time, however, no Black chaplains existed in the U.S. Army. And he wrote to President Lincoln requesting that Black ministers be allowed to serve as chaplains in the Union Army. In September 7th, he wrote, "To His Excellency, Honorable Abraham Lincoln, President of the United States. Dear Sir, in behalf of the colored clergy and churches of Philadelphia, I write to ask you if there is any law of Congress prohibiting the appointment of colored chaplains to the colored regiments of the United States Volunteers. The soldiers are anxious to have colored ministers as their spiritual teachers. Applications have been made at the War Department, but have not been considered. If there is no legal obstruction, will you be pleased to use your influence in this matter and thus oblige the colored regiments who are anxious to have religious instructions and the colored people in general who ever have been and ever will be loyal subjects to the government. Thus, your petitioner will ever pray. I have the honor to be your most obedient servant, Jeremiah Asher, pastor of Shiloh Church." Lincoln came through with his approval. Asher applied to become a chaplain of the 6th Regiment of U.S. Colored Troops, which trained at Camp William Penn. Commissioned officers in the U.S. Colored Regiments were limited to whites only. Chaplains were considered officers, and there had never been a Black chaplain at the time that Asher applied. The white officers of the regiment would have to approve this unconventional appointment. On November 1st, 26 officers of the 6th Regiment of United States Colored Infantry unanimously signed a document recommending Jeremiah Asher's appointment to chaplain of the regiment. When Asher joined the regiment at Yorktown, Virginia, soldiers were not the only people living there. Fleeing slavery, many African Americans took refuge under the protection of troops stationed at Yorktown. One of the leaders of this formerly enslaved community was a lay preacher named John Carey. He joined with other refugee Blacks in building a simple log and board-clad church on the outskirts of the community. Reverend Asher worked with Carey, helped and influenced his work, and gave this church the name of his own beloved house of worship, Shiloh Baptist Church. Once again, Reverend Asher had a hand in founding a new church where African Americans could worship as they choose. And by the way, this church is still open and active in Yorktown. Oh boy, I was really hoping that you could see this one. All right, let me escape here. Yeah, let's try this another way. Can you see anything of the slideshow?
Yes, we do.
Oh, you do?
Actually,
Oh, okay.
Okay.
it's 3
I
medals
didn't-
of honor that just popped up, Jim.
Oh, that's
Correct.
good. All right.
Good.
So
Jim,
let's,
Jim, you're in edit mode. You need to go into show mode.
where, what do I click on? Show mode. Slideshow?
Hit from beginning.
From beginning.
There
Well,
you
how
go.
about-
No,
No, hit from beginning.
How about
Far
Next
left-hand
one.
side.
on your
From current-
left, from beginning.
current? All right, we'll do from beginning here. Okay, can you see it now?
Yeah, but it's still in edit mode. I don't know what's going on.
Edit mode. How
Yeah,
do
you have
undo-
to go to show mode.
How do you do that?
Hey, Jim, do you see that?
See what?
Go down. You see that at the bottom there, slide 9 of 72 notes, comments.
Yep.
All right, you see over to the right there, there's a picture of a screen. To the left of the slide bar, there's a picture of a screen here. Keep going to the right. There, slideshow. Press that.
Can you see it?
Yeah, but it didn't work. Something's wrong with your computer.
Sorry. All right, but you can see the slides here anyway, right?
Yeah.
All right, this is Shiloh Church, and by the way, it's still active, although Shiloh congregation has moved to Christian Street, and an AME church is now in this building. Okay, this is Elizabeth Greenfield. Can you see her?
Yes.
Oh, great. Okay, we can do this anyway. Yeah, and this is the
That's the
historical
marker. Okay.
John Brown, Cato, and this is the the poster at the museum. It's an 8-foot poster.
Broadside is the term.
Yeah, work
and
the
it-
slides manually like you are now would probably suffice for today.
We'll do it this way. Yeah. So, and this is the print that was in Asher's second biography. Yorktown, this is the camp. They grew up in Yorktown. It was called Slab Town when they started making houses there. And this historical marker is there at the site of the original Shiloh Baptist Church in Yorktown, Virginia. And part of this historical marker is the story of Jeremiah Asher. This picture, you've heard a very, very good description of. This is the 6th U.S. Colored Infantry fought several battles, really good. The bloodiest being the Battle of Newmarket Heights. They made the charge that day with 367 men, and 210 were casualties. In his next chaplain's report, Asher would declare, "The history of the regiment for the last 2 months will form a conspicuous place in the history of this rebellion. Uh, their next assignment was, January of 1865. The regiment sailed to North Carolina, where the black troops assisted in the capture of Fort Fisher, which guarded the river approach to Wilmington, North Carolina, one of the few still active blockade ports. The USCT pressed forward towards Wilmington. Towards Wilmington, forcing the Confederates to withdraw. The regiment marched through the empty town in pursuit of the fleeing rebels. In a matter of a few weeks, news reached the men that Lee's army had surrendered, and fighting in the east was over. The fighting was over, but the men were not going home yet. They were stationed as occupation troops in North Carolina. Being stationed in one place for a long time, that increased the likelihood that you would contract disease. And the American Civil War saw twice as many soldiers die from disease as from battlefield wounds. At Wilmington, the list of sick men grew. Both officers and enlisted men died. At the hospital, Chaplain Asher faithfully ministered to his soldiers who were suffering from malignant fever. He wore himself down, tending to the afflicted men there in the regiment. He began feeling weak. Constant fatigue set in. He had already applied for a leave of absence to recover. The regimental surgeon wrote, Jeremiah Asher, chaplain of the 6th USCT, having applied to me for a certificate on which to ground an application for a leave of absence, I certify that I have carefully examined this officer and find that he is suffering from the effects of remittent fever, and that a change of location is necessary for his recovery and to prevent loss of life. But it was too late. Asher himself had succumbed to typhoid fever and died in the line of duty July 27th, 1865. Official documents report said disease was the result of exposure and overexertion while attending to his duties in the camp and hospitals of Wilmington, North Carolina. Jeremiah Asher was the first Black chaplain to die in the service of the United States. Franklin B. Gwynn, who wrote the history of Shiloh Baptist Church, wrote about his beloved pastor who had baptized him. He wrote, the voice that was so often lifted in the house of God, pleading with sinners, comforting the afflicted, supplicating the Almighty, is hushed in death. We, as individual members of the church, sustain the loss of a true, sincere, and sympathizing friend, one who is not only interested in our spiritual welfare, but his warm heart rejoiced in our personal and temporal prosperity, and grieved in our adversity or sorrow. He was a personal friend to each member of his little flock. As a church, we lost a most earnest, faithful, and efficient leader. And while we mourn his loss, we felt that his influence was still with us, and we trust his influence will never cease to be felt in this church. And we will ever honor his name and revere his memory because of his noble, beautiful life. That was Jeremiah Asher. He was fearless to speak out for what he knew was right and to condemn injustice in whatever form it appears. Okay. That is, okay. All right. I should have asked people to put questions in the chat here. Oh, let's see. Let's see. We can't have.
There are some in the chat. Go ahead.
There are some.
Yes.
Let's look in the chat. Come on now. Why can't I see the chat? Well, could you read the questions? I can't seem to find chat.
Okay. The first ones have to do with trying to find the slideshow.
Oh,
And so one thing I can say about the absence of this slideshow was that your language was pretty descriptive and dramatic. It was visual. And so that helped in the absence of the slideshow. When we finally caught up with the slideshow, that was very nice. So any questions that we can take from the audience without the chat room? We have Jim Mundy and Jim Paradis on standby.
oh, I should. Can you unmute yourself? Unmute.
Okay, so we have.
Or and any other questions in the chat? I can't.
Okay,
I
David
can't-
Hauer, can you unmute to ask your question?
Sure. Jim, thank you very much for that great presentation. So thorough, and I'm really pleased on what you were able to find out. I know you've been working on this for years, so congratulations on what you put together. I
you.
was intrigued because, I've been researching about David Bustle Bowser, and you reported on John, and when I spoke about Bowser, I had put with some report that Bowser's portrait of John Brown had been painted from life, and you came to me after that and said, was it really from life? Had Brown been here in Philadelphia to be at Bowser's house? Have you found confirmation of, you mentioned that Brown had come to Philadelphia in 1858 before, before Harper's Ferry and so on, and that he had stayed with Stephen Smith, very wealthy merchant and so on. But have you been able to fill in some gaps there with your research?
They do mention that both John Brown and later his widow, before the execution, stayed there. First, she was heading down to meet with Brown before he was executed, and he said, "No, I don't want you here." And then so then she was already on her way there, and she came back and stayed in Philadelphia, waiting for the end. And I know that that's one place where she stayed. She stayed a number of places with the Motts, James and Lucretia Mott, and what's the other? Dorsey. It stayed at the Dorsey family house, but I can tell you where I got that if you want me to send you the source of that.
May I ask a question?
Sure.
Catherine Hawkins here there, Jim.
Hi, I'm so glad you tuned in.
Look, I certainly want to speak to you. Do you recall, I don't know, is it 10 or 75 years ago, I sent you a copy of a letter from Henry C. Leah that I found at University of Pennsylvania, which mentioned both Asher and my great-grandfather Lewis Merwin Hobbs, who was the chaplain of the 3rd Regiment. And I wonder if you might speculate on why Reverend Asher was picked for and accepted the chaplaincy of the 6th as opposed to Hobbs. I certainly would be happy to speculate on Hobbs getting the 3rd, but I wonder if you might speculate on Reverend Asher being accepted for the 6th.
I can only speculate on this, but one thing is, you remember the 3rd U.S. Colored Infantry when they marched out of Camp William Penn?
Right.
Uh,
On the 13th of August.
Yeah, the city authorities were terrified of having them march through the city, that would cause a riot. But then they had relented somewhat when the 6th finished their training.
Right.
And when they made that march, I looked at the course of their march through the city, and it went all around where Asher's home was. So I don't know if that had anything to do with it, but yeah, he was familiar with the 6th because they marched not far from his house.
Well,
I don't know.
Yeah, my speculation on Asher is first that Hobbs wouldn't have been able to serve until mid-November because he was a principal of a high school in Lancaster County. And he didn't join the 3rd till December 21st at Morris Island. But I suspect that Reverend Asher was picked and chose to be in the 6th because of the fact that they were training and that he could stay at the Shiloh Baptist Church and still make it up to the camp to administer there. Does that sound reasonable to you?
It could be, yeah, and these were the first ever black chaplains, and there was one, I believe it was Hunter, who was appointed about 1 month before Asher was appointed. So they were like the first couple that were there in Virginia.
Yeah, I just felt that Reverend Asher would combine both his responsibilities very conveniently, of course, until they left Camp William Penn. Whereas the 3rd Regiment had a captain who was referred to as the preacher captain because he had been a chaplain under Fremont in Missouri, so that the 3rd Regiment was theoretically covered for chaplain till Hobbs arrived. But again, thank you for this talk. Very interesting as well from Mr. Moody. That would appreciate that.
We also
Okay.
have Darlene Melton waiting to ask a question or comment.
Yes, hello everyone. I really liked the presentations from both the gentlemen. I have the same question that I think another person did ask. I think it was told to us before in another presentation. Could you explain how the troops prevented the enemy from capturing colored troops or the troops' colors?
Oh, yeah.
Like how exactly how did they prevent the
Yeah,
enemy? Mhm.
well, I guess a lot can be said about that. As you mentioned, one of the things that happened, of course, Southerners were outraged that there were actually regiments of black soldiers who were sent south to kill them. They were just outraged at that. They saw it as a kind of encouraging servile insurrection, and so they said that any black soldiers captured in the uniform would either be sent into slavery or executed, and any white officers leading black soldiers would be like leading a black insurrection and like John Brown, and you'd be executed like John Brown. So there was some argue that one of the reasons why black soldiers were not put into combat right away, they were given the drudgery jobs, and like if there was more time, would have mentioned the miserable job that the Sixth had of digging a canal to help the army bypass a fortified part of the James River so they could sail up and attack Richmond. But it was miserable work. And I think that's why they got those assignments. But other people, other arguments are that they didn't trust black soldiers, that they were either be cowardly and throw away their weapons, or they'd be, on the other hand, like so brutal that they wouldn't have been kept in control, right? So they mostly gave them jobs in posts that were far away from contact with the enemy. But I'm trying to remember now. How exactly did you ask the question?
Well, I think the question that someone posed, which I was kind of curious too, which we probably won't never really know the true answer since we were all not there, is that the three soldiers that received the Medal of Honor, how were they able to prevent the other side from capturing the colors?
Oh,
Flags, yeah. I mean,
it wasn't easy. I mean, this was a remarkable feat of valor, which is hard for us to imagine. But all of these flags were carried by somebody else first, and they were shot down. None of these folks were color bearers. None of them were designated as color bearers. They had to pick up the flags after the one carrying them went down. And yes, as you mentioned, it was perilous to do this. In fact, the one Egerton, there was a bullet that actually hit the flagstaff and broke the flagstaff, and also went through his wrist. So he couldn't even carry the flag anymore. So yeah, it is kind of a miraculous thing that they were able to get those flags out of there, because anybody who touched that flag was a target.
okay, thank you.
But it really was important, that flag, because it wasn't just a decoration. Do you advance or do you fall back? There's all kinds of noise. You can't hear orders. So if the flag is moving forward, you move forward. And if the flag starts moving back, you can fall back without being disgraced. So these were really, really important. And so, yeah, as Jim Mundy pointed out, nobody wanted the disgrace of losing their flag. And oh, by the way, each of these flags, there were 11 regiments that were trained at Camp William Penn, and each of these 11 regiments had a hand-painted silk flag, hand-painted by David Bustill Bowser. And that especially was what made it valued to them, and they were given these flags in a ceremony, and sometimes the women of the town had made these flags, so they really would do whatever they'd have to do to rescue the flag.
Well, thank you. Now I wonder if there's any museum that has any of the flags.
Well, there's one, I think, that's still in decent shape, which is the 127th Regiment. But all the others are pretty much gone. In fact, I saw a letter from the commander of the 6th USCT, and he was talking about how he wanted to donate them to the Union League, but he said, don't know if you want them, because they're just rags now. They're just strips that they have gone through the weather and everything, and the colors had run. But if you want them, we'll donate what's left of them.
Okay, thank you.
Jim, may I interrupt about the flag?
Oh, please.
Please. I have evidence that the 3rd never actually received it.
Really?
It was presented at Camp William Penn to Louis Wagner, the commandant, but never actually worked or reached the regiment, which by then was in Jacksonville, Florida.
Oh, boy. I did not know that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
In the
You're welcome.
meanwhile, there are 4 full-size reproductions in the Camp William Penn Museum. So you can always come and see them as they were reproduced about 40 years ago for Camp William Penn. So it'd be nice to have a few more, but I lost track of the artist. And I remember they were incredibly expensive. So, but we treasure them and we take very good care of them. So come and see our reproductions. Paula Gajunas.
Yeah. Hi. I just wanted to add, the 127th flag was actually on display at the Museum of American Revolution, had an exhibit on Black history in Philadelphia, and the part on Civil War, they had the flag there. So I don't know where I forget. I can look at my notes where it belonged, but it was on loan from somewhere.
To Georgia, didn't it? I believe it's in a museum in Georgia somewhere.
Yeah, in Atlanta, right?
I think so.
Yeah, I remember that. Okay, that's all.
Okay, we have some more items in the chat box. I think we may have answered it. Anybody out there with more questions?
I just threw a factoid in there, not a question, but
Okay.
the factoid that those soldiers, when they advanced on the enemy position, they were ordered that their weapons were not to be loaded. So they advanced unarmed. They may have had bayonets, but they were in order, marching forward in, rank, but they were their weapons weren't loaded. In other words, they could not fire back. It's to me, it's just when I encountered that in reading the history, it's just astonishing.
But they did have their bayonets attached, and they used their muskets as clubs.
Right, but for that 150 yards, it's a
That's very true.
Sort of an uneven match.
Yep, very true.
Say the least, yeah.
Well, I don't see any more hands raised. Paula, did you have another comment? I guess not.
No, I didn't. I can't get the hand to come down.
Okay, okay.
There we go.
We'll pretend you're in church.
Okay.
Okay, well, with that, then if there aren't any more questions or comments, we'll close this program for 2025. And we'll look forward to seeing everybody in 2026 at our Black History. And I hope that we see a lot of you next Saturday at Calvary Church in Wyncote. Again, the concert starts at 3 o'clock. So with that, I would like to thank Jim Paradis and Jim Mundy for their contributions today. It's kind of unusual that we have two Kroll board members in the same program, but there's always a first time for everything. So thank you to both of you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Excellent, excellent.
Everybody
That's
take care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
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 Oh, anybody that's still on, want to ask a question that they didn't want to ask in front of everybody?
It was very informative and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, I'm sorry, I missed that.
It was very informative and I really enjoyed it.
Oh, thank you. Thanks very much. I'm glad that you were on.
Yeah, it was good. Cook for my family now. Oh, Jesus.
Oops, okay. Okay, so we still have oh, Beatrice and Donald Jones. Have you ever seen one of our programs before? Have attended a Kroll February program before? Oh, okay, I guess you're wrong. Well, okay, you're probably muted here. All right, let me stop recording. Recording.